Hey, good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time it may be when you are watching or listening to this. Gabe DeArmond here, PowerMizzou.com. Another episode of State of the Tigers, our weekly show here. We will pretty soon transition to Missouri football present day and everything that's going on with that, but got a few weeks before that really gets going. Want to remind you, as we are every week, brought to you by our friend James Carlton at State Farm Insurance in Webster Groves, Missouri. Not only a guy I've known for a while, also my insurance agent. Recommend you get in touch with him, carltoninsurance.net. You can call him at 314-961-4800. James wants to give you the best rates he can on insurance and probably wants to talk a little bit of Mizzou sports with you as well. So get in touch with James and his people get that done. So this week, going to bring on a guy that, look, if you have followed Missouri sports at any point in the last 40 years, I imagine you know our next guest. That on the other side of your screen now, the recently retired Andy Hill, former Missouri player, Missouri coach, 5 years with the Kansas City Chiefs. Andy, how you doing today?
Doing great. It's nice and warm outside and trying to stay cool.
Yeah. So like no plans today or any other day, right? You're recently retired now. You just hang out, you walk your dogs, and you do whatever your wife tells you to do.
100% true. Try to get a workout in. My goal has been to do, since I retired, 30-30-30. 30 days hunting, 30 days fishing, 30 days golfing. And so in the meantime, I played in the Mizzou event, Kansas City Quarterback Club over at Loch Lloyd this past Monday. Mm-hmm. And so that puts me at number 19 golfing for the season and 12 days fishing. So I'm working on achieving the goals.
Yeah, well, you can't do any of the things outside for another week or so because it's 99 degrees every day. But
yes, it is.
So we'll start at the end, then go back kind of to the beginning. We're going to try to cover 40 years here in about 30 minutes. I don't know how that's going to work, but I think it was officially announced your retirement from the Chiefs here a couple weeks ago. Like, why'd you kind of feel like, okay, 30 years of coaching, this is the right time to be done?
Yeah, I mean, it was certainly a great 5 years with the Kansas City Chiefs. You know, I had 4 Super Bowl appearances, 2 victories. Got beat twice. Of course, finished up this year getting beat by Philadelphia, but a great way to finish your career. And I just felt like that it was a good time to. We have my son finished his freshman year at State Fair over in Sedalia playing baseball, so we can go watch him play baseball all summer and certainly next year. We have a 16-month-old granddaughter that keeps things hopping here in Columbia with my daughter Tricia and her husband Isaac. And little Margot we see her, 2 or 3 or 4 times a week, which is good. And then just being around my friends and trying to figure out, I don't know what retirement is like because really pretty much since the middle of March I've been retired, but NFL offseason is about the same. You're playing golf, you're not that busy. I think retirement life will certainly hit me about August while looking forward to not being in St. Joe, Missouri when it's super hot up there.
So you have 5 years in the NFL after 2025 in college. I mean, and you say the NFL offseason, you're playing golf and stuff. The college offseason, there no longer is an offseason. I know there used to be, but explain to people the difference between working in the NFL and working in college football for you.
Well, the NIL and all the transfer portal was just kind of coming into effect whenever I was out of college football. So my first year was COVID year with the Chiefs in 2020. And so you don't have to worry about, are your kids going to study hall? Are they going to class? Certainly in the NFL, Dave Tobe, who I worked with the Chiefs, the special teams coordinator of the Chiefs, he said, you're going to have to learn how to put your phone down because I think when you're in college football, you're attached to your phone with recruiting and with all the problems that come up. And if someone gets in trouble, it's basically our fault that we recruited this kid or whatever it might be. In the NFL, if somebody gets in trouble, the personnel people deal with it, and you just say, well, is he here or not here? And we keep moving. So the big difference is obviously the time frame. Like you talked about, you have recruiting never stops in college. With the Super Bowl finishing up, you have a couple weeks off. Then you have the NFL Combine. then you're really just prepping for the NFL draft at the end of April, whatever it might be, 1st of May. And then you have a few, OTA practices in May and through the middle of June, and you have a full month off. And I think the beautiful thing is when you do have time off in the NFL, it's actually time off. It's not like you have, I mean, I know you can think about things and work on a few things, but it's not like you have to call 10 recruits tonight and you have to have a junior day tomorrow and you work a 7-on-7 camp or whatever it might be. There's so many things that really grind out the college calendar when you're trying to coach college football. And it goes throughout the summer. I think they have some free time here around the 4th of July, but it cranks back up with all the stuff that they have at the end of July. So I know that the Chiefs are going to camp July 20th, and I'll be driving right by them on I-29 going to Montana going fly fishing. So it'll be quite a different year for me this July.
Yeah, not bad. Well, probably won't be tempted to take that exit at Missouri Western State College.
I told a few of the players last week, you're going to hear a honk on I-29. That'll be me, beep beep, going by you. Well, you're out there sweating, and I'm going to the cool mountain weather in Montana.
So I said we were going back to the beginning. So here's the important question: are you the most famous person from Trenton, Missouri?
Well, I don't know about that. It's probably some low standards up there in Grundy County, but there's no statue.
I can give you your competition. I looked it up. There's a guy named Arthur Hyde who was the Secretary of the Agriculture for somewhere. Yeah. Carl Miles pitched 2 games for the Philadelphia Athletics, ERA of 13.5. And then my personal favorite, Roy Gardner, was an American criminal active during the 1920s, stole more than $350,000 in cash, and several times escaped from custody. He is said to be the most hunted man in Pacific Coast history. So that's my vote for most famous person.
He is certainly more infamous than I am. We do have some competition because the guys that coached me in Legion baseball, going back to Trenton in the late 70s, Mike Arbuckle and Jerry Lafferty, both have World Series rings with the Philadelphia Phillies and the Kansas City Royals. And so I was trying to get more rings than them, but I never got to that goal. I think they both have 3 World Series rings, and I was one away from that.
Not bad. So go back to you're coming out of Trenton High School. I know you walked on at Missouri. Like, what were your options coming out of high school? Did you kind of look at going anywhere else ever?
Yeah, I mean, I was recruited by kind of some Division IIs. At the time it was Northeast Missouri State, now Truman State, Northwest Missouri State, Missouri Western. You had like a half a scholarship here and $100 scholarship there. Right. But I always grew up dreaming of trying to play college football, and I was kind of motivated by Jerry Lafferty, the guy I previously mentioned, my baseball coach. He was season ticket holders to Mizzou football. And so I came down and watched Missouri play when I was a junior and a senior in high school. One of those games was 1979 versus Oklahoma. Really close game. I think Missouri lost like 23-20. It was a real close game, 27-20. But it was just, I was captivated by the environment and just the crowd and everything. And I thought, why not at least try to see if I could play college football? At least I would know when I'm 63, like I am now, that I really could find out what it was about. And so I thought, well, a great teammate of mine, Brad Perry, who was recruited by Missouri on scholarship, he was getting recruited kind of late, and Clay Cooper, who was the recruiting coordinator at the time, came up to Trenton, and I said, hey, would you mind if I, came down for the visit, and certainly would you mind if I tried out for the team? At that time, there's no restriction. And they said, sure, bring your butt down here to Mizzou and give it a whirl. And so I really had no clue what I was getting myself into. I know that we came into Tiger Towers during fall camp. I had a little bitty gym bag that I carried into the dorm with me. I had a locker trunk in the back of my car in case I didn't work out. I was actually going to go to BYU and try to play baseball because another coach there from Trenton was actually assistant baseball coach at BYU. So I got myself into it. And the beautiful thing was, I was just talking about this today outside walking my dog today. July of 1980 was one of the hottest months in history. And I was working outside. I was working on baseball fields and umpiring, and I was outside the entire time. So I was used to the heat. And so when I got down to Mizzou, I started, I believe, I was 7th string wide receiver at the very first practice because you stretched in the depth chart. So I couldn't even see the
Right.
beginning of the stretch line whenever I was starting out stretching. But because I'd worked outside all summer, the heat didn't bother me. And we got into two-a-days, and I remember James Wilder was a senior that year, and he had probably 3% body fat anyway. And those guys like that, they were, they were freezing up. Their body was just tightening up, and they were going to the hospital for IVs, and it was 105 degrees out there. And I could just keep going. So I got lucky and it was in good shape. And more out of fear than anything else, I just kind of kept running just to hope to get an opportunity to show myself. So it worked out that I actually, that year, right before we started, I'd worked my way up to second team because of guys getting dinged up and whatever it was that I had a chance to play as a true freshman walk on in the very first game that year. So, but I attribute it mostly because I had worked outside and I was in tune and ready for the weather.
So you played in 80, 81, and then 83 and 84. When you look back, and obviously those are kind of the last days of, at least for a while, Missouri being, nationally relevant and playing in some of these big games. Like, is there anything that when you look back on your playing days kind of is, hey, this is what sticks out, or this is something that you always remember from that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you look at when I was a freshman, we had a tremendous senior class. I mean, guys that played years in the NFL. We had Phil Bradley, Howard Richards, Eric Wright, Bill Whitaker, Johnny Poe, Kevin Potter, Brad Edelman, a bunch of guys, Ron Fellows, lots of names that were older than me that we were as talented, I would assume, as about any team up until, here recently, maybe 2007, 2008. We had a bunch of NFL, and of course, Phil Bradley played 10 or 12 years in the major leagues. So very talented teams. And those guys were really nice to just accommodate all of us freshmen. We had a pretty decent freshman class that came in, but it was a very competitive time. We played Penn State. I think that was the largest crowd in Missouri football history my freshman year. And it was just big games. I mean, the pre-conference schedule wasn't like it is now. We played my senior year, we played Wisconsin, Notre Dame, Illinois, and Mississippi State were the 4 out-of-conference games in 1984. So we were always playing very difficult schedule. I think we had East Carolina, who was good back then. But, I mean, there was a few games here and there you played, but it wasn't much let up. And then certainly had the Big 8 schedule back then that was very difficult. So I think you look back, you had those games early in my freshman year. You had played the BYU Holiday Bowl against Steve Young that they beat us in the last quarter there. So there's very memorable moments. But I think the best thing is the connection that I have with a lot of those players. We still connect today. And a few of the guys Steve Vandergrift just passed away here this past week. Andy Locke, there's been some difficult guys that have moved on, but it's a good group of people, and they're guys that are very accomplished in life from that era.
So you went from walk-on, ended up with almost 1,000 yards, but you're graduating in 85, degree in economics. Like what's the plan at that point? What are you thinking you're going to be doing?
Great question. Like every kid coming out of college, I did have an agent, and I had 3. Of course, they had 12 rounds to the NFL draft at that time. So
Right.
In 1985, I did not get drafted. So they thought so highly of me that I didn't get drafted. But I did have 3 opportunities. I had the Seattle Seahawks, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the Kansas City Chiefs to go try out. Signed with the Chiefs, got a big $5,000 signing bonus way back when. That seemed like a lot of money at the time. And I just really wanted to, again, go try out. You had at that time, there wasn't one big cut line like there is right now in the NFL. So each preseason game, of which there were 4, they had a cut the next Monday. So every single Monday there was a cut. So you'd kind of be carrying your breakfast tray, and you see the guy who was cutting everybody, try not to make eye contact with him, and bring your playbook, Coach Hill. So I made it, or Andy Hill. I made it to the very last cut of the Chiefs in 1985. And great experience again. Henry Marshall was a Mizzou guy who was a wide receiver there, but Carlos Carson, Stephon Page, Anthony Hancock, J.T. Smith, all very good wide receivers. I was just trying to fit in and find a way, and it was just difficult to make the NFL, but it was a great experience because the camp was at William Jewell. My family could come down and watch, training camp from an hour and 20 minutes away from Trenton and family. So it was, it was our connection to Kansas City. We were always Chiefs fans all the way up to, I remember forever. And so that was pretty cool to be able to do that. But beyond that, I had no plan, and I was just trying to make it.
So I know you didn't actually get into coaching till like 92. So what was it? What were you doing for those 7 years?
Yeah, so my dad accused me of taking a job up until hunting season and quitting a job so I could go quail hunt all the time with my friends. But that was just an accusation, an alleged accusation. But I really, I had worked in a bank in Trenton. I worked for Learfield Sports. I worked for the University of Missouri. Joe Castiglione hired me for a year. I did kind of a catch-all job where I was setting up tents for pregame tailgates and driving the helmet golf cart for, Mizzou alumni events, playing golf tournaments. Did that for a while. And really the biggest thing I did was I worked for Edward Jones, opened up an office in Brookfield, Missouri, which is still going. But I did that for 3 years, and I figured out that the competitive part of that, making money, was not a huge motivator, but the competitive environment of football was. And so I was fortunate enough to get back into coaching. Mike Wade, who was my receivers coach at Missouri, was the offensive coordinator at SMU. And they just had come off the death penalty, so they were kind of working through some things. Turner Gill was down there. So there was just some really good coaches in spot at SMU. So I was a volunteer GA in the spring of 92. And then my buddy Sam Pittman, who's now the head coach at Arkansas, got the Hutch Junior College job in Kansas that summer. And so he called me up, and I was getting married, and my wife calls it the ultimate bait and switch, that I was going around and going down to see John Sundvold and hell, this free time when I was working for Edward Jones. We go play golf and watch the Miami Heat and play Doral Country Club. And then I got married, and we moved to Hutchinson, Kansas, and we on a small salary, and was stuck out in the Tornado Alley out by Wichita.
Yeah, everybody who goes through junior college football, like, hey, it helped make me who I am and all that, but also kind of like, I don't want to say horror stories, but maybe horror stories. I mean, you're at Hutch for 4 years too as the head coach, and like, what kind of sticks out about, hey, you'd end up 25 years or whatever in Division I football, but that's not the same game at that level, is it?
No, you're right though. The people that say that are very true. The guys that started, and I can tell you, Sam Pittman would say the same thing as his trek. It took him to be the head coach at Arkansas. I mean, you're doing everything because you're doing the laundry, you're planning practices, you're trying to recruit football players to you. You're also trying to get your guys recruited out to Division I schools or whatever level they could play. So it was a pretty busy time. So you're doing everything. And you really didn't know any different because I was excited to be coaching again. And so the first couple of years, I was kind of the offensive coordinator, and I called plays. Last 2 years as a head coach. So you're planning summer workouts, and all the stuff that you're doing there was really a good plan for me to get into college coaching. And certainly it worked out because what I did was Mizzou was having team football camps at the time. And so I would load up a U-Haul trailer full of pads and helmets because Missouri couldn't use their own to do these things. So I would load up whatever number of sets of helmets and pads that we had in a U-Haul trailer, bring them to camp. And Larry Smith was coaching at the time, and Larry got to see me coach. And that's really how I got the Mizzou job. I had the connection, obviously, playing here. But when Larry got the job, I came up and worked summer camp a couple times in a row. Then Eric Wright, a great Mizzou assistant, a great Mizzou player who was the assistant. He was the receivers coach at that time. He told me that summer of 92, hey, I'm getting ready to quit here in a couple of weeks. So kind of keep everything active. And I knew Joe Castiglione was the athletic director. And so there was some connection there that I had back to Mizzou. But Larry Smith had just seen me work 1 week, 2 years in a row, and came back and interviewed for the job, which is also a funny story.
Okay, so give us the story of the interview.
So we always were going at that time. My dad, my brother, my father-in-law, David Ryan, my cousin, Steve Hill, Doug Ty, some guys, we always went to Canada fishing, during the summertime. And I was trying to find out, had Eric retired yet all this time? So we're driving up through North Dakota. We get into Winnipeg. We stop in Canada, and you didn't have cell phones back then, so
Right.
I'm using every payphone that were nearby to see if, in fact, we drove 2 different cars all the way up there. My brother was with us, and so we got to the very part where we were doing a fly-in, so we're in a float plane, and there was one payphone at the very end of the dock before we were getting ready to fly out. And I got a hold of the secretary, and she said, yes, he's retired. Eric Wright has quit. Coach Smith wants you to come up here. This is, say, July 1st. He wants you to come and interview in 3 days. So I'm like, oh, my gosh. So that cut the Canadian trip short, but I flew up.
Mhm.
We had him come pick us up early. My brother and I drove back down into Columbia. Didn't have any gear. I was going fishing from Hutchinson, Kansas.
Mhm.
Drove back down to Columbia, went to Dillard's and bought a suit. John Sundvold's wife, Tam, ironed out my shirt for me, and I went over and interviewed with Larry Smith and got the job.
And 29 years later, all went well, right?
Absolutely.
It's funny you mentioned Clay Cooper, who recruited you to Missouri. So he was an assistant at Missouri for 29 years. I think you're second on that list. You ended up being at Mizzou for 23, but like you fast forward after Larry hires you, he's here 2-3 years, and obviously things go south. Look, the life of an assistant coach in college, like when the head guy changes, that usually doesn't mean good things for you, right? Are you sitting here in '99 thinking, well, it's a good run, now I got to figure out where else I'm going to go?
Absolutely. I think the crazy thing about college coaching is you're about 1 year away from not having a job, regardless.
Always,
And
right?
so we were always reluctant to try to move. We bought the house we're sitting in right now in 1996 when we came back to Columbia. And when Coach Smith got fired, it's funny. Another funny story there is that, you're always hoping to be retained because you're at your alma mater. My wife went to school here. All of our family pretty much went to school here too. So we were down in the equipment room. Each former coach from Larry Smith's staff, Dave Tobe, a bunch of good coaches were there. They were getting called down when Coach Pinkel got hired here to Mizzou. They were all getting called down one by one because the routine is the coach brings everybody in, talks to the assistant, says, we don't have a job for you, and that's about the end of it. So we were all, as former assistant coaches Larry Smith, all in the equipment room waiting to do our interview with Coach Pinkel. So everybody came back one by one. Hey, he's not hiring anybody. Comes back, not hiring anybody. Next guy. So it was my turn to go. And so I assumed I would get the same routine. And I walk into Coach Pinkel's office. He said, I got one question for you. How in the world can you have one defensive back on scholarship right now? And so I'm like, and in my mind, I knew, and I told Coach Pinkel that a couple of weeks ago. He probably didn't remember it, but during his golf tournament in the middle of May, I said, I knew all the reasons why we ended up like that, but I'm sure there was no excuse and no reason why to explain it. And I said, it's where we are. And then the interview went from there, and I was lucky enough to be retained.
So I've said a lot of times, like Gary gets credit and deserves a ton of credit for what he did at Missouri. I don't think Larry Smith gets enough credit for kind of dragging that thing. Like he didn't get it to where Gary got it, but he showed you actually could make a bowl game here, and it didn't have to be what it had been the past 15 years.
100% agree with that. And Coach was Larry Smith. You're talking about Larry Smith, such a great person and very personable, and had a bunch of good football coaches on the staff there with him at Mizzou. And if you look back, I mean, you had a tremendous running back, you had quarterbacks, Corby. I mean, it was a running football team. Harry Heastand, his offensive line coach, he spent several years in the NFL doing that. But to get back to a bowl game was huge after I think it was 14 years between 83 and 97 when we went to the next bowl game. It was very difficult to get over that hump. And I'll never forget, we were at Colorado to be bowl eligible. And it was, it's almost like you're winning a Super Bowl because you're going back to a bowl game after hearing about it for 14 years as a Mizzou fan, Mizzou coach, Mizzou player. Missouri's not very good. And all of a sudden you won that game in Colorado and just dominated. Like, I think we had 41 minutes of actual time with the football that time at that game that we just dominated Colorado and got us to the bowl game. So getting over that hump there and going to bowl games, and I think 97 and 98 back to back, we're very accomplished. And I think it allowed, and Coach Pinkel said this too, if Larry Smith hadn't gone to bowls, Coach Pinkel might have had other opportunities somewhere else and might not have ended up at Missouri to take it to the next level.
Mm-hmm. So when Gary came in, I remember the first practice I covered in 2003. I came back and Chad Moeller told me, like, "Hey, if this guy can't get it done, shut down the program." Like, so, but the tenuous life, you're talking about a college coach, the tenuous life is, I mean, look, if Marcus King doesn't return a interception 99 yards against South Carolina and Brad Smith doesn't have the half of his life, like, I think Gary's probably still here, but there might be those of you on staff who didn't make it to the next year. When did you guys kind of feel like, oh, hang on, the turn around this corner is coming?
Well, as I recall it, we went to a bowl game, and you're saying 03, I think that's right.
Yeah, the Arkansas Independence Bowl.
Yeah, so we beat Nebraska that year. I believe that was the year we beat Nebraska. That was kind of a good comeback. But then the next year we didn't go to a bowl. And so then you're kind of thinking, okay, this could be another step back in Mizzou football history. But I think in 2005, we had Chase was there. Brad Smith was still there. Chase brought us back. We beat Iowa State in a close game, like 17-10 or something like that. That allowed us to get over the hump again and get to a bowl in 2005. And so from that point on, you were still winning. I think when you're recruiting, you're always trying to build things. So, the promise of a new facility, the promise of new things coming were always enticing to young student athletes. So the 2003 bowl, 2004, you're nervous. 2005, you go back to bowl. Then you think, okay, now we got something building here. And obviously, 2006, 2007, 2008, there was a lot of positives there that got us over the hump.
Yeah. So I'm not going to ask you who the best receiver you coached at Missouri was, because I know you aren't probably allowed to answer that. But I just want to, like, the three guys that probably stick out. I want a quick, like, hey, whether it's when you realized how good they were going to be, whatever, quick story. But Justin Gage comes in, and I mean, I remember his first year, because I think I was maybe just out of college, like basically is wasted because he played a game and a half at quarterback, then goes on to be an NFL receiver. Like, and probably a lot of talk about guys playing two sports now, probably the most successful guy that's ever done that at Missouri after Phil Bradley.
You're exactly right. Justin Gage was certainly a unique athlete. And when I remember Larry Smith, it was his last year at Missouri. We felt like, trying to make it to a bowl, trying to keep your jobs, trying to do all these things. We felt like that Justin was our best option at quarterback. And I'll never forget, we made a wristband for him that said, look at X, number one, look at X, number two, look at Z, number three, look at Y. And so we would call a play, and he'd look over to me, and I'd say, number one, look at X. There's on this play. If you're going to throw it, if you're not going to just scramble around and make plays. So, yeah, that was the time, you couldn't play one snap, you're going to waste your whole year. But we felt like at the time, and obviously it hurt his career, but that guy gave us the best chance to win at quarterback. Then the next year he moves to receiver, and obviously, was record setting in a lot of ways. But the most unique thing about him was they would finish basketball season, and they were really good in basketball. Ricky Paulding and those big guys. Quinn Snyder was the coach there. He would finish basketball middle to late March and walk into he'd walk into street clothes and listen to a few plays, anything we installed in the spring football, stick his head in the huddle, listen to a few plays, and the next practice come out and was ready to go. He was super smart, very competitive, had a great body, but man, you talk about a guy who he wasn't super fast, but he was fast enough. But he would put his body against and make some, tremendous catches, had great body control. And when the ball was in his hands, he was very difficult to tackle. And he would go, block guys. He was a do-it-all receiver. And I saw him at Coach Pinkel's golf event not too long ago. I mean, he's in great shape. He's, again, very smart. He's taken the knowledge he has. He's coaching high school receivers. So he's a very accomplished athlete. And I agree with you. Besides Phil Bradley, in my mind, he's the next best guy as far as a two-sport athlete.
I think then the guy that outside of Brad Smith, I think like your guys' first superstar was J-Mac, probably in Gary's, and like we all know he tears his knee up, doesn't play his first year. But like, did you guys already kind of know by that point what you had?
Really, you didn't see much in the summertime because you weren't allowed to go watch the workouts. So they were doing 7-on-7 when he actually got hurt, hurt his knee. But you knew from his high school career and just watching video from him, seeing him play, very accomplished, had all the skill set you needed, obviously top end, true speed, and had a great feel for finding spaces and getting open. So you didn't really know until he showed up. And I think I was on a Jefferson Club event with him sometime a few months ago, and he was talking about probably his favorite game was his first game back, because really you're coming off an ACL, you're playing in St. Louis versus Illinois, and he had a couple touchdowns. One was a big punt return that kind of turned the tide in our favor to beat Illinois that year. So J-Mac coming back and just doing it the first game was just unbelievable. Then, of course, it was a blowout for the next 2 years, and he's still got 2 years left, so you might want to think about bringing him back. He could probably still do a few plays.
Hey, speaking of guys who are still in shape, he played at the alumni basketball game 2 weeks ago, and him and Chase Kaufman were by far the best football players in that game. I mean, they weren't quite Demoy Hodge, but they could play.
Yeah, those guys. I mean, if you brought back Drew Lock in that game, he'd be comparable too, I think. Right. But yeah, Chase. I saw him play basketball when he was a sophomore. I was sitting up in the stands there in Liberty, and he took off from just under the free throw line, slam dunked, and I was like, this guy's pretty talented. We might want to start recruiting this guy.
Yeah. So the third receiver, last Mizzou guy I want to ask you about. I have maintained for 17 years that if Daenerio Alexander had two good knees, we may not really know who Jeremy Maclin was as much as we do, and B, Daenerio Alexander would be in the NFL Hall of Fame. Like, he was that ridiculous.
He was ridiculous, and he truthfully, Jeremy and Maclin and Daenerio played the same position, and Daenerio was starting over J-Mac in that Illinois game. And both played equally, but Daenerio was a freakish talent. The stellar year that he had, where he had 1,900 yards. His last year there, we should have won the Blitnikoff Award. All those things. They said because he wasn't on the preseason award list, watch list, he wasn't a winner. But that was ridiculous anyway. But he was so good that during his last year there, once the play was called, he would just kind of say, "Hey, you move over here. I'm going this spot. I'm catching the ball. I'm going to go make a play." And you're right. I mean, you talk about a guy who could get open, big body, could run full speed, could outrun guys, catch over the top of you, and just really was super. I think the best players, look at all the great ones at Missouri, super competitive young men, and he was as competitive as anybody and couldn't wait to get out there. And certainly, had he stayed healthy throughout his NFL career, I mean, the guy, you're right. I mean, I don't know how they can do an ACL surgery and put someone else's like me, my knee, like from a cadaver into his ACL. No wonder it's not going to hold up. He's got all these tremendous skills and size and all this stuff. And you put a guy out there that's not his own doing, he's not going to be healthy ever again. But we went and watched him play. Played for the Rams and made some 3 or 4 years there in the NFL. He would have been a long time NFL guy, no doubt.
Yeah. So kind of the ultimate in this business, it's like who as much as anything, right? Your time at Missouri ends in about 2018, right along there, and then like just so happens the guy that's the head coach of the team you grew up rooting for, right, was on staff when you were at Missouri, and then Dave Tobe, obviously Missouri ties. So how did the whole Chiefs that transition come about?
Yeah, so it happened. We finished coached the 2019 season at Mizzou, didn't get retained, and so I'm sitting there thinking, and I talked to the athletic director at the time, Jim Sturks. He was going to keep me on. I was going to work at the Tiger Scholarship Fund for one more year because that would have put me to 25 years, and it was kind of a threshold for retirement. And so he was kind enough to be able to do that. In the meantime, the Chiefs won the Super Bowl February 12th or whatever it was in 2020. The assistant special teams coach, Rod Wilson, had taken a job. He played at South Carolina, had taken a full-time linebacker job at the University of South Carolina. So, around President's Day of 2020, Dave Tobe and I were in contact, and he had just been down after they won the Super Bowl on vacation in Naples, Florida. My wife and I, because I had some free time, and my son, we were down in Naples, Florida, so we just kind of missed each other. He texted me, he said, "Hey, by the way, my guy just got a job, Rod, who I knew." And I said, "Oh my gosh, I'd love to be that spot." He said, "Oh, you really don't want this job. It's a lot of computers and, paperwork and whatnot." And I said, "Au contraire, I would love to have that job." So the next week after we got back, Dave and I met over in his office, and first thing he says when I walk into Kansas City, he says, "Hey, I brought you over here to let you know I'm going to try to talk you out of this job." And so I said, "Well, I'm over here. I drove over here to Kansas City to tell you I want this job." And, a week or so later, the combine was kind of going on, and Coach Reed, they kind of talked it out. And so a week later, I was, hoping, praying, working out 2 times a day, thinking I could get back to coaching. And that was a great phone call. Coach Reed called me here right in this room, and my family was here. He said, "Hey, you might as well come over here and get to work when you can be here." I said, "I'll be there tomorrow morning." So I drove over that very next morning and went to work for the Chiefs in March of 2020, and then I was working maybe 1 full week, and COVID hit.
Right.
And so I was back over here in Columbia doing a lot of Zoom calls, and we didn't have a training camp that year. We did some stuff there in KC prior to the season starting. So I really didn't get a place to live because I didn't know if there was going to be a season or not. And so I lived in a hotel for 2 months, the first part from August to September. Had a little window there about 2 weeks before I found a condo to move into and to stay with my wife's friends over there in Blue Springs for 2 weeks, and then got a job, got a condo there to stay for the job.
So just kind of want to wrap up with this. I mean, now that you're kind of moving on to the next phase, I mean, you think back to summer of 1980 and you just wanted a shot to play big time college football, right? I'm just going to go take my shot. Any way you could have possibly imagined what it all led to?
Absolutely not. I mean, there's been 3 constants in my life. There's been Trenton, Missouri, Mizzou football, and Kansas City Chiefs football. And to be able to pretty much coach 29 years in the state, not have to move. When I was the Chiefs coach, my wife and son stayed here so we could go to Rockbridge High School and not mess up his friend group and all the stuff he had going on that was positive. Absolutely not. It's been, looking back from where I'm sitting today to back when I was a freshman in college, it couldn't have played out any better. And obviously, I have the Chiefs not even been to a Super Bowl, and then all of a sudden now they've been 5 and 6 years. It was kind of a great crescendo to my career. That's kind of why I told my wife, I said, "Sarah Hill, it won't be much better than this, even if you keep winning the next 10 Super Bowls." I mean, it's already been, we've done it, and the only thing better would be be the head coach of the Chiefs, and Coach Reed's not going to relinquish that role. So I've had a really fortunate run. I've been really lucky to stay at Mizzou for 24 seasons through 3 different head coaches. Win a lot of games, a lot of great memories with my players, our players at Mizzou, and certainly the coaches I coach with were in close contact with quite a few of those guys still. But having been at Mizzou, being a Mizzou guy, and being a Kansas City Chiefs guy, it couldn't have been any better.
Well, look, you went to bowl games as a player. You left. There was nothing. You came back. They started going to bowl games again. So Chiefs have gone to 5 Super Bowls in 6 years. If that stops, I know who to blame.
I think with Pat Mahomes and Coach Reed, they'll be all right.
All right. Well, Andy, appreciate it, man. We'll see you around town, and best of luck finding a lot of good places to fish and hunt over the next few years.
Thank you, Gabe. I sure appreciate it. And go Tigers.
All right. Thanks a lot. Andy Hill joining us today on State of the Tigers. Again, just retired. And Coach Hill, I wrote this a couple weeks ago. Other than, John Cadillac had the Mr. Mizzou title, Andy Hill is synonymous with this university and this program as anybody over the last 3 decades. So wanted you guys to have a chance to hear from him. Want to remind you again on the way out the door, get in touch with James Carlton, State Farm Insurance in Webster Groves, Missouri. If you live in Missouri or Illinois, James is going to take care of you. CarltonInsurance.net. Or you can give him a call at 314-961-4800. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Like, comment, subscribe, do all those things that help us out on YouTube while you're here. And another fun episode for you guys next week. We'll be back. Going to record it on Tuesday. Again, I don't like to tease things too far in advance because schedules change and all that. But another fun one for you next week that I think people will enjoy. We'll talk to you then. Thanks for hanging out.